Hello everyone, welcome again. For the Douglas Adams fans in the audience, I could never get the hang of Thursdays, but we made it to Thursday, the last day of our conference. You will notice that I did not plan to have a closing session, so just allow me to say a few words about how grateful I am that you all came. Also allow me to say never again, I'm never doing this again. It might change if you give me a decade. And I look forward to seeing you in Genoa next year. The next organizer, Joel Guerrero, could not be in person with us here today, which is why we didn't make a good show of it. But please keep an eye on the website, etc. And I promise you nicer weather in Genoa, well, hotter weather in Genoa than you got in Cambridge. I hope you enjoyed the conference. Today we have about 2/3 of the day organized. So we have the keynote, only one. We have 2 sessions, and after that we have birds of a feather. I was asked about birds of a feather. Well, this is your time. So we will hang around, find people that you need to talk to, organize collaboration, set up these big European projects that you want to apply for together, exchange PhD students, and earn your Nobel Prize. So that's what the session is for. And moving on, it is my honor to invite our last keynote by Dr. Fred Mendonca, my old friend. I hope he's not going to get insulted about that. I guess you're listening, Fred. And before I hand you over, the reason why Fred is not here is that he is COVID positive at the moment. And I heard from some sources that he was doing CFD simulation of viruses spreading in close places. So I'm looking forward to finding out how do you get COVID from doing CFD. On that note, Fred, may I hand things over to you?
Okay, that's wonderful. Of course, I'm not insulted by your earlier comments. So thank you for that introduction. And once again, to the organizing committee and yourself, thank you so much for the invitation to speak to everyone here today. I'm a little bit hoarse and throaty today, so forgive me. Also down with very high levels of medication in the system. It is usually the case that the audience falls asleep during the presenter or presentation. On this particular occasion, I apologize in advance if I'm the one that falls asleep with the levels of medication in my system. So once again, thank you so much for the invitation to speak today, Herv and the organizing committee. What I'll be talking about here is OpenFOAM governance to a certain extent, an overview, and thank you for all the contributions to all the presentation slides on OpenFOAM governance and subsidiary slides. And then I'll just finish with some high social impact simulations that we have been doing with OpenFOAM. It is on the COVID subject. So yes, I have been doing simulations of virus spread and virus mitigation. Clearly, it's not helped me very much. Okay, this is my favorite starting slide. It's really to acknowledge some real giants in the world of CFD dating back more than 50 years. And CFD has been used in engineering science now and applications in real engineering for more than 50 years. And it's really great to acknowledge that, including the founding fathers as I see them, both Brian Spaulding as well as Tony Jameson. So I really want to move on to, beyond 50 years. It's really nice to be able to acknowledge the fact that the whole OpenFOAM community has come together. And really for the past 4 years, we've been driving together what we call the OpenFOAM governance. Here is an overview slide of the governance itself. What we call the steering committee comprises a lot of OEMs and real user organizations that are the prime motivators to making sure that OpenFOAM is continuing to develop, continue to be usable for real engineering, design application, and social impact. I use that in a much more wide context in this particular case. I continue to be the chair of the steering committee. We're represented by OEMs, for example, Volkswagen, Audi, General Motors, FM Global. You see here that there is one slot open, which will probably be filled towards the middle of this year or towards the autumn time. We're also very, very grateful for several release authorities in participating in the OpenFOAM steering, including the FOAM Extend community represented by Hrv himself, and also research organizations currently represented by Technical University of Darmstadt, and we hope to have at least one other incumbent in the research organizations representations before the end of this year. We also have a permanent member of what we call the Release and Maintenance Committee, and that's Dr. Heather from OpenCFD directly. Okay, so that's the steering committee. The steering committee is informed by several technical committees, what we call functional and applicational. The functional ones tend to be, looking at specific areas of OpenFOAM, for example, numerics or turbines modeling or geometry and meshing, HPC capabilities, documentation, optimization, all that kind of stuff. And the special interest groups are really looking at the application side. So we have representations from nuclear, from marine, and I'm very pleased to be able to announce over the past 9 to 10 months that we've expanded the special interest groups to automotive, as well as turbo machinery and data-driven modeling. So welcome and thanks to the chairs for those subcommittees or special interest groups, starting with Hakan Nielsen, who gave a small presentation at the beginning of this year of the activities of the turbo machinery group. At the next OpenFOAM release webinar, which is going to happen on the 21st of July, we'll welcome Andre Weiner, who will be talking about the data-driven modeling special interest group. So please register for that and listen to Andre's overview of the activities of the data-driven modeling SIG. And we also are very pleased to start off the automotive applications group, which is really co-chaired by General Motors, Volkswagen, and Audi collectively, currently represented in the chair seat by Modud Rahman, who's from General Motors. My continued thanks go to Professor Gavin Tabor, who really acts as the coordinator, the joint chair of all the technical committees here, the functional as well as the special interest group. So thank you once again to Gavin. So here is the overview of the steering committee and the functional and technical committees. The one thing I would like to say is that we are struggling a little bit, really because of motivational and individuals on the meshing side. So I'm currently taking over the meshing subcommittee, and if anybody would like to join me in progressing the activities of meshing in general, you'll see my contact details at the end of this presentation. So please feel free to contact me directly. It'd be great to hear from you and progress what we are doing on the meshing side with OpenFOAM, directly connected with OpenFOAM governance. So that would be great. Please contact me directly. Okay, these next couple of slides are really to do with activities from the technical committees, which really deserve a lot of acknowledgement. So let me start with the successful launch last year of the OpenFOAM journal. So this 2022 is the second year of its existence. It is really the initiative of the Documentations and Technical Committee, obviously backed by the OpenFOAM Governance Steering Committee. What it does now is publish the double-blind review papers. What can I say? Its uniqueness are pretty much two things. First of all, it directly benefits OpenFOAM users, particularly the OpenFOAM community in general. But it also includes sections for test cases, which allow the readers or the participants in this to reproduce results. That is OpenFOAM cases, OpenFOAM files, to be able to take some of these cases and reproduce them as presented in the paper themselves. It remains to be free to publish and free to access. We are really very grateful to the two organizations that you see at the bottom of the screen there, who are continuing to, this year, 2022, as they did in 2021, and thank you again, to Compute and CFD Upstream, that are making a small contribution of an actual kind of monetary donation to make sure that we're able to cover the inevitable costs, which are small costs, of registration for ISSN and DOI. So thank you to those two organizations. Excuse me. A little bit more about the journal itself. 8 editorial members, several advisory members. This is a little bit out of date now, but there are probably many more than 8 published papers. many more under review. This is the second year. There are 2 editions per year. It now has an official ISSN number, and every publication will have a DOI. So how can you get involved? Please look at journal.openfoam.com. Go in there, register as a potential registrant to download the papers, or even apply as a reviewer. Submit your contributions through there, etc., etc. So here's a general encouragement for everybody who's listening to, if you're not already doing that, start to participate in the OpenFOAM journal activities. Let me move on here with thanks to Miguel Nobrega for the next few slides to talk about another initiative that has come from the OpenFOAM governance. So this is the HPC Technical Committee. And about a year and a half ago, we initiated and started the ExaFOAM project, which is a Euro HPC joint venture together with local funding authorities. So thanks to all the local funding authorities, but also Euro HPC for initiating this project. Here are a few slides of description of what it's all about. So the total budget is around 5.4 million euros. The contribution from Euro HPC is about 2.4 million. It started April 1st last year and will continue until the end of March 2024, 36 months duration. If you want to find out more about that, it has a dedicated website, which is ExaFOAM. I misspelled that, ExaFOAM.eu, www.exafoam.eu. Okay. Just a few highlights here is, we work in terms of orders of magnitude. There's one ExaFOAM project and one OpenFOAM project. We have, in general, hundreds of contributors, tens of thousands of CFD organizations participating. And the amount of real money that is spent on OpenFOAM in general, including costs of HPC and executions, will probably sum into the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars per year. Okay, we're expanding the performance of OpenFOAM towards HPC in general, and this is how we're doing it. First of all, the approach is to look at specific bespoke developments to be able to enhance the HPC performance. We do this by setting some grand challenges. Everything that is going to be developed during the project will be released as the normal part of the normal releases in terms of 6-monthly releases coming from OpenCFD. And it's promoted and supported by the general government structure in general. Okay, let's go through the partners here. You see 12 partners, which are very prominent members within those that are active in OpenFOAM in Europe. It's a European-based project, and here's the list of the contributors. The next slide here is a list of the stakeholders, which are not just European-based, but also will have footprints in Asia and in North America. So it's really great to get that traction and tangibility, not just in Europe, but much more widely for ExaFOAM in general. Work package 1 is a management task that is ESI's. Work package 2 is the specific work package, which is looking at defining HPC grand challenges, high impact industrial test cases, and also micro benchmarks, which are much smaller case derivatives from the HPC grand challenges and industrial test cases. Work package 3 is all about code refactoring, looking at particularly IO parallel and also accelerators potentially within the concept of CPUs and GPUs. Work package 4 is what we call evolutionary, looking at new algorithms, new data structures with respect to high and massively parallel systems. Work package 5 then is all about profiling and performance and co-design, and this is led by the lead beneficiary, Barcelona Supercomputing. Work package 6 is all about integrating the findings and the learnings and the physical manifestations of the positive impacts of the project in the general releases, fully QA'd under ISO 9001 and released under the 6-month release sequence. You will have noticed that we've recently released the OpenFOAM v2206, and that's the framework in which we will be expecting to release all the new findings within the ExaFOAM project. Work package 7, and once again, thanks to Miguel at University of Minho for providing these slides is all about the dissemination, impact, and exploitation. So it's he that continues to identify areas and high impacts for the outcomes of the project. So thanks again to Miguel. Okay, so that's all about governance and two highlights of the successful recent activities in OpenFOAM governance. What I want to talk about now for the next few minutes is some projects with high social impact and where OpenFOAM is having a real social benefit to society in general. I have no other way to describe that, but in the way I've just done, society in general, which actually puts us in a very kind of nice position. As engineers, we tend to see very esoteric designs and activities, but here we see a real impact on everyday activities. So, working with the ventilation aspects, working with steady state and transient, with thermal, aerodynamic scalars, we have been able really over the past 18 months to 2 years to make a real impact on designs and mitigation within the time of the pandemic. Most people will prefer to think that it's all over now. It's almost certainly not over, as I'm a physical manifestation here. And what's going to be happening for the rest of this year and beyond that is an open question. But OpenFOAM is already showing that it has had some real positive impact. Here's where OpenFOAM was used to design the ventilation inside mobile tracking units or tracing units or testing units. So these are vans or converted trailers that drive around the country that are able to do very rapid testing as and when they're needed during the heights of pandemic and shutdown. Social impact in terms of social housing and community buildings. Governments really advise that if it's essential to be opening or to be using public buildings, that the advice is to have strong ventilation by opening windows and doors. Here's a brief study to show that for a particular social impact in a community center, that the occupants of the building will very much experience the direct fresh air coming from open doors and windows in the occupancy area of that particular building. So this is a very good reassurance to the occupants of that building that they were the first to be benefiting from fresh air circulation from external wind sources. Here is another application with respect to medical treatments and healthcare in general. So here's a treatment room, and the idea here was to try to make sure that for whatever treatment was being incumbent in the center of the room here, here's a dental practice, that the building ventilation which was already available may not be up to your full building regulation standards. If that is the case, then auxiliary ventilation from portable or wall-mounted units could be possible to enhance the general ventilation. In this particular case, we have an air cleaning unit that is mounted on the wall, which then enhances the building mechanical system and gives the necessary protection to the occupancy of the room, that is the operator, the dentist or the operator themselves, and the patients. The real impact here is the following. The regulations on the basis of the standard building ventilation will define what they call a fallow time. That's the time that the room has to be left unoccupied to recover, let's say, a minimal infection potential. That fallow time can be significantly reduced by introducing auxiliary ventilation like the one that you see mounted on the wall here. So where you mount it on the wall can affect the effectiveness of the enhanced ventilation. But at the end of the day, wherever you locate the enhanced ventilation allows the clearance time to be significantly reduced, and that is to reduce the fallow time. Reduce the fallow time, and the throughput for this particular treatment room increases a great deal. And that's the major benefit here of introducing auxiliary units in healthcare. Anybody's going to ask, well, okay, it's great to see these pretty pictures on CFD and OpenFOAM used. How is it validated? Well, we've gone through the validation exercises here for particular buildings. Here's an office, open plan office, where the CO2 levels were measured in different parts of the office, and you can see that OpenFOAM correlates really, really well with the measured CO2 levels. So scalar transport, CO2 levels, any form of infection will correlate almost exactly to these validation exercises. So here's OpenFOAM proven in terms of validation for scalar and ventilation circulation within an open plan office. I'll come back to this final application, which is the ventilation in schools. As part of the last animation, it'll also give me a chance just to clear my throat a little bit during an animation. So I'll come back to this one a little bit later. My final kind of public impact is in public transport. Here is the ventilation in buses and trains. Effectively, what we're doing is the following. We're running all the methodologies that you've just seen for ventilation and virus spread mitigation to be able to apply it to public transport situations where you can have multiple occupancy, different ventilation scenarios in terms of the location and the magnitude of the ventilation in the bus or the train, climate conditions, meaning neutral or summer conditions or winter conditions, which of the passengers are wearing masks and which are not wearing masks, passenger activities and locations in terms of being able to understand the impact of passengers infected or otherwise breathing or talking loudly. And so this gives a huge number of variabilities to try to understand what the impact would be for a number of scenarios. So model order reduction here is really where we're leading to. In order to assess model order reduction for these various we have an automatic slide transition over there. These various dependencies. We've invented a concept called reciprocity matrix, which tells us how one passenger is going to affect all other passengers within the confined space. So having then defined the reciprocity matrix, we're able to import this into a system of design and experiment, use a model order reduction theory, which at ESI we call PGD, that's a proper generalized decomposition. And then from that to take a certain amount of data extraction to be able to decide what is the impact of the input design variables and the output in terms of the importance of each of the design variables. So here is one impact study showing that if we assume that most of the passengers are infected, what are the major impacts in terms of the variabilities? In this particular case, the ventilation magnitude is the single most important factor. The wearing of masks is probably the next important factor. For only a small number of infected passengers, you see that the importance column or the median exposure level changes its level of importance to a certain extent. But I just want to finish here on this particular study on the impact of wearing masks and no masks. So if you're continuing to be potentially infected or to infect others, and you're in a situation of public environment or public transport or public exposure, my encouragement is please continue to wear masks. They are probably the single most undervalued mitigation component during this pandemic. Okay. The outlook for this particular project is, we're continuing to do studies in trams and trains and buses. The combination of validated OpenFOAM used for data reduction, data analysis, model order reduction is becoming a very, very powerful tool indeed. Okay, so I promised that I was going to show you a slide from the school. Here it is. It has some audio, so I'll be quiet for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Welcome to our school, St. Teresa's Primary School in Morden. Our school has over 470 pupils in nursery, reception and year 1 through to year 6. We are very pleased to be involved in this project sponsored by Innovate UK. This image shows computer modelling of the wind blowing from the south westerly direction.
During the pandemic, the Department for Education asked us to open all our windows and doors to allow fresh air in. Most of our classrooms filled with fresh air from outside. It is cold in the winter, but we have the heating on and wear our coats to keep us warm. Depending on the wind direction, some classrooms don't get direct fresh air from outside, but receive stale air from other classrooms through the corridors. One way to avoid stale air from spreading infection is to use air cleaners.
We have installed air cleaners in every classroom to help us and our teachers remain healthy and safe. Thank you to our school leadership team and governors for buying these air cleaners and looking after our well-being. It's been fun reading and recording the carbon dioxide, the BBC weather forecasted wind speed and direction every day. Thank you to DFE for sending the sensors to our school. It is interesting to learn the link between high CO2 and tiredness and leads us to open windows. It's great to watch the reading go down after we open the windows and doors. When it rains, snows or hails, or to conserve energy, we need to close some doors and windows. In the summer months, we hope these air cleaners will also help hay fever and asthma sufferers. We ask our government to focus on energy conservation and air quality, not just in our schools, but to safeguard all our futures. Thank you.
Okay, I hope the audio came through. For some reason, it wasn't coming through on my own computer. Yeah, out of the mouths of babes and little children, that's the phrase that comes to mind here. Thanks to them for really grabbing this opportunity with both hands and working through this particular system. Using OpenFOAM and doing the full level of testing within St. Teresa's School in Morden. When I say social impact, in fact, yesterday the kids were invited to the UK Houses of Parliament to give this presentation to MPs at Westminster in the UK, and they absolutely stole the show. So it's really great that, as I say, this is having real local and national government impact. Okay, so I think I'm just going to now finish with a few closing slides. So finally, just to encourage, as I mentioned before, there is a 6-month release sequence of OpenFOAM. The latest one is version 2206. That was released a couple of weeks ago. There will be a release webinar on the 21st of July, to which we encourage all of you to register and attend. I'm just going to click this link on the bottom here, which is where you find additional information on the release features for OpenFOAM. You should now see the screen, which is essentially in openfoam.com under download and current release. So here's where most of the new features are listed in terms of upgrading to this version, post-processing, numerics, solver and physics, boundary conditions, etc., parallel usability. But the thing I want to do most of all is to acknowledge the incredibly hard work of my colleagues, especially those at the top of the list there, for their continued hard work. This 2206 represents the 14th consecutive on-time, on-spec release of OpenFOAM within the last 14 6-month period. So absolute kudos to the team here for getting these features released absolutely on time, bang on time, every time. So yeah, thank you to colleagues. Okay, the final slide is really to advertise a little bit the 10th OpenFOAM virtual conference, which is going to be on the 8th of November. There's the registration page. We've confirmed our first keynote speaker, who's Professor Catherine Noakes from the University of Leeds, who has been part of the advisory group, National UK, called SAGE. That's a strategic advisory group on kind of national events, and she was pulled in by the UK government to advise on ventilation and fluid dynamics in general. So she will be giving a brief insight into the kind of stuff that's been done on ventilation during the pandemic. Okay, so those were my slides for today. Thanks again to the organizing committee for inviting me to give this talk. I'm available, I guess, at this time for a few questions. You've heard a little bit today about the fourth year of OpenFOAM governance, some of the key aspects that are continuing to linger and be promoted and continue to be promoted here, especially the OpenFOAM governance and especially the OpenFOAM journal and the ExaFOAM project. And I've told you about a few projects that have had a very high social impact in local and national government. So thank you all for listening over the past 35 minutes. Feel free to contact me on the email address at the bottom there for any auxiliary questions that you might have. But at this point, let me hand back to Herv if you have any questions or a Q&A session. Happy to answer something.
Thank you, Freddie. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us from your sick bed, and I hope you're going to get well soon. And I also have to thank you for sharing this societal impact, because you made me cry. So let me hand over this to the questions in the audience.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering whether you could elaborate on how you see the development of the linear solvers in OpenFOAM.
Yeah, are you talking about the ExaFOAM project in particular?
I am, yes, indeed.
Yeah, okay, so I think for the moment, probably I'll encourage you, as the best form of my answer, to visit www.exafoam.eu. Where especially it is the work packages 3 and 4 that are devoted to this area. So there are several things to talk about there, and we're looking at the linear algebra form, but also execution on different types of platforms, CPU and GPU. Let me just encourage you to look at at exafoam.eu directly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation, and particularly the things about the high social impact. I'm afraid I myself had my own particular soapbox I was standing on every time something was mentioned about the use of masks, particularly early on in the pandemic. It seemed to be clear that fluid mechanics, even on a sort of, how can I say, popular science level, its importance, particularly in terms of, well, this one with public health, hasn't really been realized by, how can I say, the media and the general public, since it would have been obvious to anybody with almost like a general knowledge of airflow and fluid mechanics and entrainment of water vapor, that masks should have been important. What do you think needs to be done to make things like fluid mechanics become part of popular science the way that astronomy has recently become?
Yeah, pretty pictures helps, doesn't it? I mean, those are great pictures coming from NASA in the past few days. But yeah, it's a great question. So thank you for asking that one in the first place. I mean, you're right in saying that something like 20 months to 2 or even 2.5 years now of COVID, it took at least 6 months for people to understand that ventilation was an important part of the transmission mechanism. So we're already 6 months into the pandemic, and people are just beginning to realize It was about that time that through UK RI and Innovate UK, we were awarded this social impact kind of project, of which you've seen some of the results. I would say the biggest impact that that has had is not to run scientific validation exercises and then present them to, and I don't mean this in any way a unkind way, to presentations or conferences like the one we have today, or IMAKE, or SIPSI, or whatever else. The real impact was to grab stakeholder studies, which is going to local halls and shopping malls. It's going to schools. It's going to medical treatment rooms on the high street and in hospitals, because you'll find that the people that work in those environments are experts in their own area, not necessarily in ventilation. But when you begin to say, look, here is the impact that it can have when you open a window or a door, or when you wear a mask, when they see that tangibility translated into their own environment, it makes the biggest impact. So I would say the engagement with the stakeholders in that particular project was really the key to taking that next step in translating what we all know and understand as engineers into the direct social impact. And the best way I can describe it is working with St. Teresa's School and the 4 kids that were on the video. It took literally 5 minutes to explain to them what ventilation was doing and its benefits, and they just took the baton up from there. So yeah, engage with the general public. That's how you'll have the direct social impact. I hope my answer makes sense.
I was more even trying to get to the stage of where is the fluid mechanics, Brian Cox, and can we engage Dara O'Brien in it as well?
Yeah, we'll take pigeon steps, and then I'm sure it'll find somebody with a really high social profile or public profile that'll take up the baton. Are you volunteering?
Hello, Fred. It's Gavin here. First of all, I'm very sorry to hear you've got COVID, but it's nice to see you virtually, at least. I notice in the CFD wider CFD community, I often come across a persistent and very annoying rumour that OpenFOAM doesn't scale well on large systems. Can I encourage the ExaFOAM people to publish, hopefully in the peer-reviewed literature, scaling studies to show its scaling, so we could have something to point to and which we can use to put this myth to rest once and for all, please?
Yeah, sure. There will still be challenges. Gavin, thank you very much for your kind wishes, and also for that great question. Yeah, there will continue to be challenges with extracting the best performance for all forms of HPC platforms. I would say that when people do a literature search, they'll read and see references to Prace, like and other publications which are saying, look, here's OpenFOAM not performing well, probably dating back 2012, 2014, 15. It has got a very, very long way since then. And what we're trying to do with each release is to demonstrate performance scaling of reasonable size CFD cases, up to the 1,000, 2,000 processes, which is what the normal run-of-the-mill users will be. It'll be a hot or a sweet point. So I think for 1,000 to 2,000 processes, we're already doing very well. The data published on scalability is part of the 6-monthly OpenFOAM release, and hopefully, as you quite correctly encourage, the dissemination team within ExaFOAM will be able to get that positive message out much more quickly, much more impactfully. But yeah, we should put that to bed. There'll be continuing challenges, but we'll be here talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of processes, not the low thousands. But thank you for that comment.
That's fantastic. I just wanted to follow up, and this isn't really a question to you, it's a comment to the rest of the audience. We've got a Birds of the Feather session at the end of the day here. I'm looking forward to talking to anybody who might be interested in learning more about governance or just talking about what we can do. I'll be around during that session, and I invite anybody who's interested to join me.
That's a great plug. Thank you. Gavin, with my own apologies that I won't be, that I'm not there. I would have loved to have been there in Cambridge for all the days of this week. So, you know, my apologies. Hopefully, you've been able to interact with Matthias Janssens, who has been trolling the corridors in Cambridge, and hopefully interacting with all of you. If you haven't had a chance just to speak to Matthias, I think he's still around.
Matthias is waving at you. Well, on that note, please allow me to thank you on behalf of the audience and in my personal name, because it's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you get well soon and we see you in person. Thank you.
And from my side too, thank you so much.